Welcome to the final presentation for Week 2 of GA103. We will finish talking about color, color characteristics, color mixture, color usage, and the effects of color.
We will now look at local colors in comparison to local values. Local values are when you vary the amount of whites and blacks, juxtaposed to create the illusion of shades of gray. Chiaroscuro is a technique often used by artists which demonstrates the effects of light and shadow. Here we see chiaroscuro being used to create dramatic lights and darks on her upper torso and back. Interpretive values are where an artist will portray values differently than we would typically see in photography. It creates values that are dreamlike or forces us to use our imagination. In the left image, we see the dreamlike values of interpretive color. In the right image, we see local values with such realistic shadows that it mimics a photograph. When trying to create emphasis and design interest, we use light and dark areas to draw a viewer's eye to a particular area and use light as a focal point, thus forcing extreme lights and darks to create emphasis. We will now discuss spatial effects. Modeling is a gradual change in values that usually indicates gradual rounding towards or away from the viewer or light source. When transitions are more abrupt, the contours appear angular. Gradations in value as spatial shading can be used to barely suggest value changes to evoke extremely complex spatial relationships. In the left image, we see the spatial relationships of the trees and buildings in the foreground. Even though the values and shades are subtle, their transitions are abrupt, indicating that all elements in the composition are overlapping. In the right image, we see modeling used to show us the form of the human legs and torso. The gradations are subtle and soft. Both black and white can be pushed forward or back in space, depending on their spatial clues given. Because of atmospheric perspective, we automatically interpret things that are sharper in detail to be closer than things farther away. The sharpest and whitest parts of the figures are facing towards us and to the right side. This shows us that they are not only closest to us, but also the light source is coming from the right side of the page. The figures and items in the back are softer and more muted, showing us that they are further away. Now let's look at depth and space. Where areas of a work are treated in the same value range, they tend to flatten out. Variations in values and shades help us to see things in dimension and interpret things to be at different distances from us. This tree has a three-dimensional feel because we see differences in the values and shades. We see both highs, lows, and all the shades in between. Values are often used to evoke a certain emotional response to a work. Strong value contrasts provoke an immediate emotional response, and light values evoke a light emotional response, a feeling of happiness. Each of these two images shows us a different emotion. The one on the top left is soft and serene, whereas the one on the bottom right, while soft in tone, is harsh in nature. A dramatic illusion can be created using only the value scale. An example would be if we sharply contrasted blacks and whites juxtaposed as repeated lines or shapes. They may create mysterious color sensations. Finally, we will discuss color psychology. We have found that there is an affective nature of color. This encompasses symbolic and cultural associations. Color and design is found in the palette or color scheme or the composition as it intensifies and embellishes shape, line, texture, and type. Here we see a chart that gives us colors and their psychological response. We also see listed notes of interest about a particular color. For example, brown. Brown is known to represent the earth, reliability, comfort, and endurance. However, it is found that food packaging in the U.S. is often colored brown to great success. In Colombia, brown discourages sale. Interesting. Here we see another example of colors and their psychological representations. In our last slide, we see well-known logos and their colors. Think about what the color of each logo says about the audience and products. From our earlier slide, we know that brown represents the earth, reliability, comfort, and endurance. It is no surprise why UPS picked that color. This concludes our lecture. Today we discussed using color. We looked at what is color, color characteristics, color mixture, color usage, and the effects of color. This is the end of the presentation.